When a person begins to grow inwardly, their values, their rhythms, and even their silence start to change. What once felt familiar may now feel constricting, not because others have become lesser, but because the inner standard by which life is measured has shifted. Psychological growth alters the lens through which we interpret reality. Conversations that once satisfied now feel repetitive. Ambitions that once bonded us now reveal different depths, and the emotional climate we can tolerate becomes more refined. This is not rejection, it is differentiation. The psyche, in its movement toward wholeness, naturally seeks environments and relationships that can mirror its new level of awareness. To remain psychologically honest, one must allow this distance to emerge, even when the heart resists it. The guilt arises because we confuse separation with betrayal, as though evolving beyond a shared stage of life were a moral failure rather than a developmental necessity. But just as a child cannot remain in the womb without suffocating, a developing mind cannot remain in old psychological structures without stagnating. Growth creates distance because it must, and the question is not whether you will outgrow certain bonds, but whether you will have the courage to outgrow the version of yourself that is afraid to. At the heart of this guilt lies a conflict between two powerful forces, the need to belong and the need to become. Loyalty binds us to the past, to shared memories, to identities that were formed in mutual dependence. But self-development demands that we loosen those bindings, not out of coldness, but out of honesty. The psyche cannot mature while remaining entirely loyal to earlier versions of itself, or to the roles it once had to play to survive. We fear that choosing growth means abandoning others, when in truth it means abandoning the illusion that we can remain the same and still become whole. This inner tension often feels like disloyalty, as though our progress were a silent accusation against those who have not yet felt the same call. Yet, psychological integrity requires that we answer our own evolution, even when it separates us from familiar ground. To betray this call is to live a divided life, one part moving forward, the other anchored in obligation. And a divided life slowly erodes the soul. You are not disloyal for growing. You are disloyal only when you refuse to. As one begins to rise in awareness, a subtle fear often emerges. The fear of being misunderstood. Growth can look like distance. Clarity can look like judgment. And silence can be mistaken for superiority. The mind worries, will they think I believe I am better than them? Will my change feel like an accusation? This anxiety is rooted in our deep social instinct to remain equal, to not disturb the emotional hierarchy of the group. But psychological development inevitably alters that balance. When your inner standards change, your presence alone can mirror what others are not ready to face in themselves. And the ego, sensing this, interprets your evolution as rejection or arrogance. To avoid this, many people shrink back, dilute their insight, or perform a familiar version of themselves to protect others from discomfort. Yet this self-minimization is a quiet form of self-betrayal. True humility is not pretending to be small. It is allowing your growth to exist without apology. You are not responsible for the projections others place upon your becoming. Let them think what they must. Your task is not to be understood by everyone, but to be truthful to your own unfolding. And the courage to stand in that truth is the beginning of real freedom. Beneath the adult struggle to move forward often lives a much younger voice, one that learned long ago that belonging meant safety. The inner child does not reason in concepts of growth or individuation. It reasons in terms of attachment, and loss. When relationships begin to change, this part of the psyche whispers that separation equals abandonment, and abandonment equals danger. Even when the conscious mind understands that growth is necessary, this earlier layer of the self reacts with anxiety and guilt, as if evolving were a betrayal of the love that once kept us alive. We may then cling, over-explain, or emotionally remain where we no longer belong, not because it is true to who we are now, but because the past still seeks reassurance. Yet maturity requires that we learn to soothe this inner fear rather than obey it. The task is not to erase the inner child, but to become its protector instead of its prisoner. When we can hold our own vulnerability without sacrificing our direction, the psyche begins to integrate rather than split. Growth no longer feels like abandonment, it feels like guidance, and in that moment we realize that the part of us that once needed permission to grow is now the one capable of giving it. There is a subtle but crucial distinction between compassion and self-sacrifice. To understand another's limitations does not mean we must live inside them. Many confuse love with shrinking, kindness with silence, and loyalty with emotional paralysis. Yet psychologically, this is not virtue, it is avoidance. It is the fear of standing alone in one's truth. Real compassion does not demand that you abandon your own growth to preserve another's comfort. It asks only that you do not harden your heart while you move forward. You can honor someone's path without walking it. You can respect their pace without slowing your own becoming. When you remain authentic, you offer something far more valuable than agreement. You offer an example of what is possible. To stay small for the sake of harmony is to teach others that fear should guide life. To grow with quiet integrity is to show that love does not require self-erasure. The psyche matures when it learns that boundaries are not walls, but definitions. You are allowed to love people and still choose yourself. And the moment you stop betraying your own depth to preserve shallow peace, you step into a form of compassion that is strong enough to be real. Ultimately, guilt dissolves when we recognize that growth is not a personal choice alone, but a universal process. Life itself is movement, and the psyche obeys the same law. Some are called to mature earlier, some later, some through pain, some through reflection. To demand that all souls evolve in synchrony is to deny the individuality of the human journey. When you accept that each person is at a different psychological season, comparison gives way to understanding, and guilt gives way to peace. You stop asking, "Why am I ahead?" and begin to see that ahead and behind are illusions of the ego. There are only different depths, different tempos, different lessons unfolding in their own time. Your task is not to carry others on your back, nor to wait in psychological winter when your own inner spring has arrived. It is to walk your path with respect for theirs, without apology for your own becoming. When you no longer resist the natural rhythm of your growth, the need to justify yourself fades. You realize that evolution does not ask for permission, only for courage. And the moment you stop feeling guilty for becoming who you are, you finally become free to be who you must.